As educators and school administrators, it's important to understand what personnel records are and how they are managed. Personnel records contain information related to an employee's employment, including performance evaluations, disciplinary actions, and personal information. In Georgia, the Georgia Code that addresses the release of personnel records in K-12 public schools is in Title 50, Chapter 18, Article 4, which is also known as the Georgia Open Records Act. Under the Georgia Open Records Act, all public records are open for personal inspection and copying, except for those specifically exempted by court order or law. This means that anyone can request to see public records in K-12 public schools. If a public record exists, an agency must produce it for inspection within a reasonable amount of time, not exceeding 3 business days. However, agencies are not required to produce records that did not exist at the time of the request. If only some of the requested records are available, agencies must provide those records that can be located and produced within 3 business days. If the requested records are unavailable, the agency must provide a description of the records and a timeline for when they will be available. A central issue in the confidentiality of personnel files is whether the information constitutes a public record that must be reasonably accessible to the general public. Public record, freedom of information, right to know laws that grant broad access to school records may directly conflict with privacy laws, requiring courts to balance the interests of teachers, school officials, and the public. For public employees in the state of Georgia, work-related information that's subject to public disclosure under the Georgia Open Records Act includes salary and other compensation information, job titles and descriptions, dates of employment, work-related honors, awards, licenses, certification, membership in professional organizations, publications, presentations, contracts, agreements, work-related correspondence, and emails that are sent or received using a government email account. Here is a question. If you work for a public agency in the state of Georgia, can your supervisor refuse to give you your own performance evaluations? The answer is no. There have been cases where employees have reported racial discrimination in the workplace, and their supervisors have retaliated by withholding their performance evaluations and unfairly using their performance as a pretext for employment termination. Public employees have the right to access their own performance evaluations. The Georgia Open Records Act provides that public employees have the right to inspect and receive a copy of their personnel records, which includes performance evaluations. Your supervisor cannot withhold your own personnel records. What work-related information is exempt from public disclosure in the state of Georgia? Here are some examples. Records that consist of confidential evaluations submitted to or examinations prepared by a governmental agency and prepared in connection with the appointment or hiring of a public officer or employee. It's important to note that not all personnel evaluations are automatically exempt from public disclosure. Some information in evaluations, such as misconduct or disciplinary actions, may be required for public disclosure. Records that contain personal identifying information, such as Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, and bank account information. Medical records of public employees. It means that in the state of Georgia, state public employees' vaccination records are generally considered to be medical records and are therefore exempt from public disclosure under the Georgia Open Records Act. This is because medical records contain personal and confidential information about an individual's health status, which is considered protected information under state and federal privacy laws. However, there may be some exceptions to this general rule. In general, governments have additional powers during a declared emergency. In the case of COVID-19, many governments have declared states of emergency or public health emergencies, and some have used this authority to implement measures such as mask mandates, business restrictions, and vaccination requirements. Whether a government can mandate vaccines during an emergency would depend on a variety of factors, including the specific circumstances of the emergency, the legal framework in place, and the constitutional protections that apply. Some legal challenges to vaccine mandates during emergencies have been successful in certain jurisdictions, while others have not. Ultimately, any decision to mandate vaccines during an emergency will need to balance the need to protect public health with the rights of individuals, and it will likely be subject to legal and public scrutiny. Records that review a public employee's home address, home telephone number, personal mobile or wireless telephone number, mother's birth name, credit card information, debit card information, account number, password used to access his or her account, and financial data and information other than compensation by a government agency, and records that are part of a pending investigation or litigation or that are protected by attorney-client privilege. What about facial information of teachers and school officials? Facial information is not explicitly listed in the exemptions under the Georgia Open Records Act. However, if facial information is part of a video recording or photograph taken in a public place or during a public event, it may be subject to disclosure under the Georgia Open Records Act if it is considered a public record. As educators and school administrators, it's essential to be aware of the regulations governing the management and disclosure of personnel records in K-12 public schools in Georgia. It's crucial to ensure that work-related information that is subject to public disclosure is maintained accurately and securely, and that exempt information is appropriately safeguarded. Transparency and accountability are essential principles that guide the management of personnel records in public schools, and school administrators should strive to strike a balance between these principles and the need to protect the privacy and rights of individuals.